Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Friday, everyone. We are live. It is July 17th. If you have lost track of what day and date it is, yes, we are in the middle of the year. Thank you everyone for joining in. This is another episode of Rethink Culture, where we explore culture from a three-pronged perspective: home, society, work, and school. I'm really excited to be hosting the show again. Thank you to three brilliant people who took over my shows for me this week, but I'll be introducing them shortly because I was sick and they took over my show. They did a fantastic job. So before we continue, I'd like you to give a thumbs up if you're wherever that you're watching from. Give it a thumbs up on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. Give it a thumbs up on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and also comment where you are tuning in from, your name, the city, and of course your favorite flavor of ice cream. It's just a random thought that I had to throw in. So again, this series is made possible by Chief of Hearts, a culture science company. I am your host, Mila Duchon, founder and CEO of Chief of Hearts. Today, I will be dismantling machismo and bringing light to how toxic masculinity can impact the workplace negatively and causes psychological turmoil to one. Machismo is inherently prevalent in Latinx cultures, and it is also inherently present in the white culture, Asian culture, and in other cultures as well. As we know, culture does not only happen in a singular space, but it happens, carries, gets reiterated, transferred at home, at workplace, in schools, and in society as a whole. Men who were once boys were taught how to be a boy, or were programmed by books, telly, school systems, narratives, religion, family culture of what it meant to be a boy, who then grew up to be a man. If these childhood, teenage beliefs weren't consciously challenged, the paradigm of machismo becomes adopted as an adult, and it bleeds into society. Machismo, or toxic masculinity, manifests in the form of aggression, oppression, abusive behaviors, or narratives. Mansplaining, treating women as subhumans are some of the outcomes from this. And we see these kind of treatments at the workplace impacting women and POCs at the workplace. To dismantle machismo and find resolutions, I have invited 6 panelists to join in the discussion with me. To further explore, let me bring them on one by one. So first off, let me bring on Sarah Morgan. Sarah Morgan is Chief Excellence Officer of Buzzarutney. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
And next up, I have got Gabe Leo. Let me look at him on here. Hi, Gabe. Gabe is the host of Made from Scratch, and he was one of the brilliant people who took over my show this week because I was sick. Thank you for taking over, and thank you for being here.
No problem. This is fun for me. I love having these conversations. You learn so much from them.
Fantastic. And next up, I have got Melanie Peacock. Oh, I love her name. So let me bring her on. Melanie Peacock is a passionate human resource professional and educator. Thank you for being here, Melanie.
Hi, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to engaging with my fellow panelists and learning with and from everybody. It's a really important topic, so thank you, Mila. Thank you for coordinating all of this.
And you're welcome, and thank you for being here. And next up, I have another brilliant human, Annie Lee. She is a podcast host of Living with Anitude. Please do subscribe to that because I really love that title. She's an entrepreneur and a mum. So thank you for being here, Annie.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And of course, we have got another brilliant human, Mike Patriarchy. He is a dreamer, thinker, doer, and entrepreneur. Thank you, Mike, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to learning from the real brilliance at the table.
Now, all of you, thank you again for being here. And we already have got so many people like giving a thumbs up, and we have got people saying hi. So let's take a moment to say hello. From Twitter, we have got ASR Podcast saying hello, Mila. Hello, ASR. Thank you for joining in. It's a pleasure to have people tuning in. And of course, we have got Tiffany Cool, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Keel.
Thank you. And she says, Melanie! So I had to emphasize that as all. And of course, we have got Yvette Mercer, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and says, hi, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And of course, we have got one more panelist who just joined. Let's see if we can get him on the screen without the banner hindering the face. There you go.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So, do I call you Chubbs, or how would you prefer to be called?
They're all my names. Anyone you choose.
welcome. And Chubbs is an attorney, and he messaged me a few days ago, recommended by another good friend of mine. So thank you everyone for being here. Really excited to kickstart this conversation. And for a start, I want to explore a little bit about change. Right, the call for change right now in the workplace is so happening right now. Right, the change for the climate of workplaces. It's at a tsunami level. Everyone wants to see change, and there are efforts to create change in different forms of way. But for a start, I want to focus on machismo today, because this is one of the topics that is not widely discussed. So for a start, I would like to understand, what are your understandings on a deeper cultural level of what machismo is? So I'm going to pass the floor to you. Whomever would like to start, please go ahead.
Well, let me go ahead and start, since I'll go ahead and start. So for me, it was part of ingrained in my culture growing up. And the word is actually a derivative of Latin, what it means to be a male, and the way that we operate. So for me, seeing it really being a part of how I grew up, and what machismo is in the culture, and how it was always, the man who had to bring home the bacon. He had to be the chivalrous one. He had to be all of these things, right? And of course, the wife, the mother, was left at home to, of course, tend house. That was what it was growing up, and that was an understanding as a young male growing up, and seeing that. And even today in the culture that I see, it is still very prevalent of what you would think. Like, think back to America in the 1940s and 50s, where the husband was the breadwinner and the wife was to just take care of the house and the kids, and that was her job. That was supposed to be expected of her. Those things are still a lot alive in the Hispanic culture, and it's something that I, again, really don't. I try to stay away and teach my daughters a little bit different, because that's not the culture I want them to grow up in. And it's one of the cultures that, thank God, that I had a strong mother, a strong grandmother, to show me a little bit different of what it was not to be that, because I had friends who grew up in that, and they didn't really know how to interact with a partner or a wife or somebody who was very strong-willed. It was very tough, and sometimes that led to abuse. I mean, because it was something that was not normal to them, and because they grew up seeing what their fathers were and how they thought that's how life was supposed to be lived. And it's very tough, even now, to look at it and to think how we can change that stigma. Especially in that culture, because again, it is very ingrained in what we do. I mean, everything is separated, even in our language, everything is separated into either feminine or masculine. I mean, it's tough to kind of say, well, it's not acceptable anymore. And it really going to have to start with, again, kind of like changing everything. You're going to have to teach the next generation, really start and showing them what is acceptable and what's not. It's very, and again, I said, this is what I grew up in. And I was not the typical Hispanic child growing up. I was always deemed too sensitive because I didn't want that. I saw what it did to my mom, and I did not ever want to do that to anybody else. So it was tough seeing that in the culture, and to think even now, as we've advanced as a society, that here we are yet again, and it's still happening. So, I mean,
I have always seen machismo as an extension of patriarchy, because at the end of the day, it's the perpetuation that men should hold power and women should not. And as a woman, I reject that. And it's hard for me to imagine when I think back to what it must have been like in the 40s and 50s, it makes me incredibly sad, because I think about how many women must have felt repressed and oppressed, living in environments where they felt like they had little say, little opportunity, and little hope that things would be, different for them, that their voices would be heard, that they would have, the opportunity to live out whatever their dreams might have been. And if they chose to go against that grain, what would happen to them? And so, when I reflect back on those time periods, those are not, is definitely not a time period I would want to, trade places with at all. But I see it all as just as an arm of patriarchy, just that complete umbrella of what that concept is.
So Sarah, I'll jump in, and I really thank you for sharing that, because I think deeply about it too. And I not only think about women that felt suppressed or oppressed, I think about how damaging that was for our society. I think about the brilliant contributions that wouldn't be made if we look around, look in the midst of a pandemic, and we look at how many of the people that are guiding and navigating us through, both from a political and a medical sense, a lot of them are women. But the other thing is we talk about how a lot of that has changed. But here's where we'll, I hope, get into some deeper dives when we chat with each other today, is has it changed enough for men? While we might see it's acceptable for women to rise to the occasion and play these different roles, what can we do better to allow? And I think it was very brave, and Gabriel, thank you for sharing that you said you were sensitive. And is that still shunned and looked down upon? So this whole thought about machismo is, are we actually being open and vulnerable enough and accepting enough as a society to accept those differences? So it's not just about elevating women, it's also about being accepting to the various ranges and emotions and capacities of men and allowing them to be authentic.
So I completely agree with that. I think there's some different levels here though too. I think of macho when I think of that word and what that means to me, and there's a fine line between the way a man just is versus the way a man is said to be and should be. So men are, for the most part, pretty much more masculine. Like, men and women are different. So I think that has to be celebrated also, not just focused on that that women and men are, it's not equality. It's just that there are differences, right? And the acceptance overall of the sexes, the way that we show up is what I think is the most important topic, and that what I think gets missed. It's less about, who's more masculine, who's more feminine. I think we each have tendencies of both. You know, we do have both that makes us up. Some men are more, you know, macho seeming or macho acting. And the question is, was that put on them, or do they feel the need to act that way? The one thing I want to say is that one thing that bothers me, and we can talk about this after too, is like perception. So, you know, like I come into work as a, hi Mary, I come into the office and sometimes being an assertive female, I'm perceived as aggressive or a bitch. When I, you know, and is that machismo that I'm giving off, or is that, you know, why isn't it more accepted that we are just who we show up as we are? Why does it have to be labeled?
Well, and to follow up with that, Annie, I mean, look, I've spoken about this, about all the different isms, whether it's sexism, racism, any type of hatred, any type of issue with equality. It goes back to the education system, right? I mean, I'm 41 years old. When I was in an elementary school and they said, do you want to grow up to be a teacher one day? That was a female's job. But do you want to be a principal? That's a male's job. Do you want to be an astronaut? It was always a picture of a male. Do you want to be a police officer? It was always men. You know, and then you can go through the financial industries, everything else, right? Which I've worked in, and I've worked in many industries. It's ingrained into us, whether it's through education, through religion, through any other way. It's ingrained into us that men are supposed to be a certain thing, right? And, you know, for a period of a couple of years, I was a stay-at-home dad while I let my ex-wife go, and I supported her opening a business, growing her business, being the breadwinner. And I got so much slack from my family, right? Like, why are you doing this? And I said, because it makes the family happier, right? So it was the best choice for our family at the time. And you know, there's a lot of things here. This is a much deeper level of acceptance, because as a male in society, it's so hard to be accepted if you're going to support women and lift women up and willing to take a backseat to that role, right? So there's so much hate and there's so much slack that we take for that as well. I feel like there's many levels of deepness to this conversation. There's many levels that need to be revealed. And this isn't something that's going to change overnight. And for people that believe that change has happened are really, you know, really just misinformed, right? This is something that's going to take a couple generations to filter itself out. And it's going to take teaching our children differently. My 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy, right? I'm raising my girls to be as independent and, you know, educated and as talented as they want to be, right? And I'm raising my son to do the same, right? I treat them equally, but I also praise their uniqueness, like Annie said, right? There's uniquenesses on both sides, and I feel like there needs to be that balance. And right now, our system isn't set up for that. And until there's some type of mental health, emotional support, whatever it is, that people get retrained on sensitivity, get retrained on their way of thinking, I don't think we're even that close to this change.
Wow, very interesting conversation. Yes, I agree with the first 3 speakers, and I agree with the last 2 speakers. And here's why I agree with all of you. You know, too often when we talk about machismo, as the speakers have said, it's such a deep concept that needs to really be unpacked at many levels. And I was just writing as you were all speaking, you know, you talk about macho from the context of physiological, right? Then you talk about macho from a sociocultural context. And then you also talk at it from a historical context, which is what my sister up there was talking about, thinking about machismo in thinking about patriarchy. So my brother there, the last speaker, Mike, talked about, you know, this idea of nurture, right? So the question that came to my mind was, how are boys and girls nurtured, right? How are they raised? So machismo is not just some abstract concept that we pick up along the way. It starts from when the kids are in the womb, right? We treat the girl child differently from when they're in the womb than the way we treat the boy child and when they come out. And then even if as radical parents who are progressive, we try to get this out of our heads, there is still those subtle treatment differences that are in there that you forget sometimes, right? And then, then they grow up and they become, adolescents. And then at adolescence, they start to identify with other societal norms that fits into that cultural context or that nurture that has been brought on them from home, right? So, it's such a complex thing that is ingrained in us. And as has been said, it's going to take a lot and a very long time to untangle it. But it's great that we are having these conversations and we are starting to talk about untangling this. And one final thing is that we also have to differentiate between, as I said, the nurture part of it versus the culture, where somebody chooses to belong to a polity that uses machismo as their unifying core, right? So you have a lot of people who go to university and then they join these groups, and and then that's where you start seeing the toxic masculinity coming as the tenets of that group. So I was raised in a society where women did hold a lot of leadership, but the men always walked around feeling very important, like the leaders, right? But when you look critically, the women did a lot of the work, right? So it is all of these things and the way that we have to have our young ones and even those of us who are growing to switch our perspectives, to understand this and to have discussions that are not necessarily accusatory, but rather uplifting for understanding.
Man, that's a lot of beautiful insights and heart insights chat today. So I want to touch on a few things really quickly. And I love that, Gabe, you mentioned about, you have the sensitive side to it and you refused, right? You challenged that whole paradigm. And that's the whole concept. And that ties in really well with everyone's point today, which is it has got to start with nurturing. It has got to start with childhood, right? And excuse me. And you brought up a really good point, Chubb and Mike, and all of you brought up a really good point as to, how are children introduced? What kind of languages are we introduced? Like Chubb, you brought up a point as to even parents, right? As much as radical they are, like why even the color concept of blue and pink, it's still tied with gender, right? There's still narratives like don't run like a girl. Do not throw like a girl. To Annie's point, when you are assertive, right? A lot of the times, the wrong kind of adjectives are used to describe women who are assertive, who are confident, who are courageous, right? If you stand up and speak up and say, no, I'm not going to do that, then you'll be called a bitch. But if a male does that, they will be labeled, oh, you're so courageous, you're so charismatic, you are so confident, right? It's just these preconditioned notions of what we have been programmed. And it also goes back to how one becomes conscious about challenging these paradigms, right? So I want to transition into the next question with, and we can't unpack everything within the day. It's like multi-layered, as everyone has shared. So as we transfer into communities, right? Like Gabe, I'm so thankful that you are teaching your daughters what man should be. My dad, growing up, my dad was like, you will do engineering. Engineering is not just for man. You will stand on your own feet. You will not depend on anyone. That is how my dad brought me up. My dad used to say, you will not depend on any man. And excuse my language, my dad used to say, just because a man has got a penis does not mean that he controls you. No. And that's how my dad brought us up. So I want to ask this question. How do we transfer this into communities, right? How do we promote masculinity as a positive, healthy aspect of it, and say it's okay to be vulnerable? And how do we transfer this into communities, workplaces, schools, society, in how men treat women and children, because at the other receiving side, men and children are impacted by this. So I'm going to start exploring some resolutions from all of your perspectives.
Uh,
Go ahead.
Can I go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Very good question. I have this radical thought. Maybe it's not so radical, but it's just a thought. I happen to think that a lot of the work, and I know our girls and women already do a lot of heavy lifting on this issue, but I happen to think that it starts with the women, and here's why. There is a thing about male children being close to their moms, and it in a way, I think that could be a good avenue, because moms can sort of encourage those attitudes, those expressions of self that are often put as on by society or construed as belonging to one gender or the other. So I have a son he's very sensitive to, and so we encourage that. We say it's good to be empathic. That's an asset. Empathy, kindness. So we encourage those things, right? I don't tell my son, you just got to be strong in these moments. Well, when there are moments where I could encourage that, I find ways to encourage it. But I realize one thing. He's a lot more sensitive when he's around his mother than when he's around me, right? And that's not by any making of mine or his. It's just, I think it's just a natural thing. So I think the moms then have a higher role to encourage this, because then when they encourage that, then that confidence that, hey, I can really express myself. I don't need to feel that I have to be, exhibit this outward expression of macho to be a guy or a boy or a man when I'm in my friends' circles. My family appreciates me, and they tell me that, being sensitive is an asset, rather. So that's what I think we start with at some point. And this directly embeds it in the communities, because as we know, the women are the backbone of the communities again. So that directly you're translating that right from nurture, right from the way communities are built, and then sending that energy, that attitude, that habit out there.
Well, thank you for that, Chubbs. And I think my response isn't going to surprise anybody. As an educator, I think a lot of this belongs in the school system. So of course now I teach university and college level students. But what we do as a chance to be educators, and this is one of my passions, is to get people to critically think and to challenge ideas that they have long held. And that's uncomfortable. That's really uncomfortable for people. And we talk a lot in leadership classes, and we use adjectives, Annie, and we pop up adjectives and say, so what do you think of male, female? And we then get them to even understand that a lot of what they've been brought up with and what a lot of our community and society validates is built into them, and they don't even realize it. So through the education system, we have an opportunity to encourage critical thinking, to help with self-analysis and development, and to help people understand their own thought processes, and then to challenge it. So there's many opportunities there too. And I think just having those ongoing conversations, and I encourage anybody listening tonight and all of my panelists to keep doing this, to go in and speak whenever you have a chance and you're invited in. We need to go in and chat with these young people, because, they hear from us academics and they think, wah, 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 that's nice. What's the real world all about? And that's why we need to bring in that experience and bring in our thoughts and let them know that these things happen in the real world. And that, yeah, a woman who's assertive could be called a bitch or be that. And they don't want to hear that. Like, what? That happens. And what are we going to do about it? Because they are the future. And we've just said that it's going to take a few generations to make meaningful difference. So let's capture them. And let's keep that momentum going.
Annie, you want to go or you want
No,
me to go?
you're
Okay.
good. Go ahead.
Okay, so for me, keep in mind, right, I'm a single father of 3, and they're just wandering around, so I'm trying to keep them at bay. So just we might have a guest panelist. At the end of the day, I think it's bigger than that, right? And I feel like just like any other ism, any other hatred, I feel like the allyship, right, that you called Mila so much, I feel like it's the men that have to stand up and make this difference. There has to be men that will stand up and say, this is wrong. This is how we need to correct it. And they need to stand up for this cause. And I need to stand up, right? I need to be the one saying that this is not how women need to be treated, that there is equality there, that my children will be different, and anyone else that I can impact along the way, right? And I feel like, yes, the education system also is a huge part of it, but I feel like it has to start younger. I feel like it needs to start in preschool. I feel like it needs to start as young as humanly possible, right? Because if you wait till university age, or if you wait till, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, even 10th grade, whatever it is, by then it's too late, right? It's already ingrained into them. And if there are cultures, there are people that are really ingrained into their cultures. I have a tremendous amount of respect for everybody's individual culture, but I also think that as a society, there needs to be some type of overhaul to how we treat our humanity, right? Because we're all part of humanity and we're all equal in that respect. So until there comes some type of neutrality there, I feel like without neutrality, there can't be equality, right? So I feel like there just needs to be some type of stepping up to the plate and bringing all the pieces together. But I feel like when it comes to machismo, or whether it comes to being macho, or whether it comes to being sexism, whatever it may be, I feel like it's the men that have to stand up and really push change. And until that happens, there's not going to be change.
Yeah, and I would add that I agree very much with what Mike said, and I would add that men need to do that because of men. Like we keep talking about, men need to do this because, women need to be equal. And that makes me uncomfortable because it pushes women to this standard of being like men, right? And I don't think that that's the answer. So I think that the answer, and I lost view of the rest of the panelists, but I think that the answer is really about men focusing on the benefits that they gain by breaking down those walls and beginning to look at themselves as whole people that are allowed to have the full spectrum of emotions. Because when they start to see themselves that way, then they will begin to be able to see women that way as well. And that's how we get to the neutrality that Mike talked about, so that we can get to equality in terms of how we treat one another. And that, again, to everyone's point, has to start as early as possible. It can't be just, the moms telling boys that it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sensitive. It has to be the dads doing that too, and as loudly, if not more loudly, than the moms.
So I think that, everybody's on the right track here. I think that we need to have more celebration. I don't love that I'm just on myself and I can't see everybody nodding when I say stuff.
Yeah, I know. That's how I was like, what happened? I thought y'all all went away. I was like, I'm just gonna keep talking.
I was nodding, Sarah, when you were talking.
I couldn't see you.
But I was like, I like to, at least to see, or if somebody goes, oh man, I know I'm going down the wrong track. But I need to see some celebration of everybody's stuff. So I have a sensitive Chebs. I have a sensitive boy also. I really hope he's not watching, because he'll be like, Mom, not because he's embarrassed to be sensitive, but because I shouldn't be talking about him. But, he's an extra sensitive boy, and he comes from me, so I'm not surprised. But, I celebrate that when he has feelings and he shows me those feelings. I say, that's really good that you can feel empathy around that, or that you feel compassion for yourself or that person. And as far as my little girl, I mean, she's a bruiser, but she's also really sensitive too. So like, I think everybody from a young age needs to be celebrated. But even if you're not young, we can celebrate things in the office. You know, we can point out people's masculinity or femininity or none of it. Just, this is how Annie is, you know, like she's assertive, she's a go-getter, she's driven, she's, you know, not a bitch or aggressive because she goes for what she wants, you know. And I think that if we celebrate individuals, then we can highlight what's unique and special about them. And then everybody can start to feel a little bit more respect for one another in tandem with that.
Yes, great answer. I love that. You know, to what everybody said so far, a lot of it is so true. You know, and that's why I've taken a different approach as a father. Because here it is. I mean, here's the thing that it's hard to, I mean, it's great that we talk about this and that we want to enact change. But on some level, it's going to be like what Mike said. It's got to be transgender. It's going to be generational. It's going to have to be. I won't be able to see the effects of it. I'll tell you that right now. That's wishful thinking, because in Mexico, in the countries down there, it is heavily ingrained. And I mean, heavily ingrained that way. It takes their children coming up here learning that there is equality up here for them to understand that they'll have a chance to learn that. Because down there, it is the exact opposite of what we do here. It is everything that we do opposite up here. So, like being a sensitive kid, hey, stop being a pussy. Stop being a bitch. It is all of these things. You know, I am not that way with my son. I'm like everybody else here. I teach my son a different way. I'm like you, Annie. I celebrate when he loves to be loving. He's the biggest love bug. He gives hugs and kisses and all the good stuff. And I celebrate that. I said, son, that's what you need to do. That's what it really is about. You keep doing that, you'll have a life full of happiness. But it's hard to see that when I see it from other people's, from the other perspective as well. When I see a friend of mine who has grown up in that culture, who's grown up and seen it, and now it's part of what they are and what they ingrain in their kids to that level, where they see it and they do the same thing. I mean, if I see my son crying, I go pick him up. Hey, what's wrong? What's going on? And I might see a friend of mine or somebody that I know, just an acquaintance, do the same thing. And they go, hey, get up, wipe it off, be a man. And that's tough to see. And it is. And it's very hard. You know, the only way is, again, it's going to start with each one of us teaching our next generation and showing what then the next generation, what it's going to be like. And it's going to take a lot of time to do that, but at least it has to start now. It has to start with each one of us doing that. You know, and even to the point where I get to where I see that going on, I say something. I see somebody say something like that at a party or something, or at a gathering, and somebody, dude, please, do you know how fucking insensitive that is? Do you know? And again, they look at me like I'm an idiot, but it's hard for them to have to understand that, to see that and go, you're essentially warping their fucking minds right now. It's incredible that you don't even know that. So I do have to point it out to some people at a very harsh level for them to understand, because again, it is hard to turn that around. And I would love to see the other side of it turn around like what we're doing now. I would love to see that. That's a dream. That's something I would envision, hopefully, for the rest of my life. And but I know the reality of things. But it doesn't mean that we have to accept that reality all the time. We can change the things that we control. We can do the things that we can do like that. I never know. I mean, again, it is different for each individual, but at least we have to start the process of doing that. And again, I grew up totally different than what my culture was. So it's different to interact in that way and see that still going on, and it still makes me just shake my head sometimes to go, that still exists. And it's, go ahead, Annie.
I just have a question. I'm totally listening to you, Gabe, but I have a question for the group, because I'm really interested to know, what about the times when it's okay for a man to be masculine in a situation where masculine, or if let's say we're in an office and a bunch of chairs have to be moved and heavy lifting has to be done, and a man steps up and says, no, I got it. That wouldn't insult me.
No,
because
I think that's
stronger than I am.
Part of being chivalry, yeah.
Right. But where's the line is my question. Like, where's the line, and how do we differentiate?
Well, like for example, whenever women had to actually go to had to go to court for their right to serve in the army, to fight on the front lines, right? That's asking somebody, say, yes, I get it that I'm a woman and that you want to protect, but if I want to serve my country and die for my country, I should have the same right as a man to do that. Because it hasn't been very long that women have been allowed to serve in combat. I mean, you're talking you're only talking about maybe 10 years, as opposed to how long has the Army existed? How long has our service in arms existed? I mean, I think that there's at some points it's okay to let a man be a man. Mm-hmm. But then I also think there are ways that you should also you should look at it as well. And I equate this to sports. And I hate to take it to that level, but what women's sports and what men's sports are not the same. You see such a big gap. I mean, a man can make a generational wealth being a baseball player, but yet a woman doesn't have the same opportunity. Mm-hmm. Same thing in basketball. Basketball is one that I can equate it to, because there is a women and men's league. A man can go make generational wealth doing his talent that a woman can't do. I mean, you tell me how that's fair.
And I would add that when, like in your example, Annie, of lifting the heavy things, if the woman doesn't mind lifting the heavy things, then let the woman lift the heavy things. Me personally, I don't care who. I don't want to lift the box. Okay, so whoever wants to step in and lift this box can have it, because I don't want that responsibility whatsoever. So that doesn't insult me at all. But for some people, but to me, the expectation automatically that the man lift the box is not appropriate, because what if he can't?
Right.
Then what? And then, now this man has been made to somehow feel inferior or inept or whatever, because they can't lift the heavy thing, or they can't do that whatever that stereotype, they can't shoot the ball, they can't, punch the thing, whatever, that stereotypical thing is that we expect men to do. Suddenly they can't do it, and now their whole existence gets called into question. For me, that's where it gets twisted. So I don't have a problem with chivalry, and I don't have a problem with men wanting to take on traditionally masculine roles. But where it gets weird for me is what happens when they can't, and now somehow we decide that person is deficient or inferior because they can't. And the other thing that I'll add is that in the workplace, where for the most part our laws expect everybody to be treated equally, because I work in the human resources space, it gets very sticky, which is why Me Too is not the only reason why Me Too, but that's why that has been a difficult transition for people to make in the workplace. And suddenly men are like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because I can't say this, I can't do that, I can't pick up the box, I can't open the door, because suddenly I'm gonna be in the human resources office and I'm gonna be in trouble. So it's this whole paradigm shift of like, men don't even know how to function anymore. And that's really unfortunate. But that's our fault as a society for boxing them into this very one note, one way of being. And then now we've asked them to balance that and to be different. And they don't even know what different looks like. And they can't even imagine, what that looks like. So that in my personal life, my husband lifts the heavy things and he opens the doors and he, takes he gets mad at me for making my daughters take the trash out. He thinks it's a guy thing. I just gave up. I'm not going to argue with him about that in our household. But I can't translate that into the workplace. I can't say so-and-so always has to empty the dishwasher while such and such only has to do. Like, I can't do that because that doesn't translate into every space.
Real quick, if I could. Okay, quick one from me. I think it all boils down to this, Annie. It boils down to respect, right? Boys will be boys, girls will be girls. Sometimes this happens. But I think what we need to do is educate each other that we should be conscious about how our attitudes, our beliefs, our actions affect the other people. And we should also be respectful in the ways that we express our beliefs about ourselves, our attitudes, and also our energies. And I think if we can do that, then it allows each individual to express themselves in recognition of their own agency, but then it allows them to be respectful so that if boys gather and they're talking boys things, they know that we got to be respectful to women and we don't have to denigrate them to make us feel like this is a boys' conversation. So it boils down to that respect.
I love that.
That's a lot of hefty thoughts and insights, which I really appreciate. So I want to transition, but before I transition, I want to say something and put it out there to Annie's question. When is it a time for a man to be masculine? And from my perspective, right, living in different parts of the world, I have seen how egalitarian cultures work, where egalitarian cultures where men do take on the identity of a female and female do take on the identity as a male. Male do cut themselves purposely to experience how women bleed. Those are all tribal cultures where they do experience what a woman feels, and women do take on the identities of male just to experience what males undergo as well. So coming from a larger lens, it all boils down to how do we define what gender must become, right? In the United States, North America, South America, gender is so specified. And to Gabe's point, gender even has got a language, not just in Mexico, Germany, France, yes, in different Asian languages too, right? In Europe, a chair has either got a femininity or masculinity role, right? Mm-hmm. So that transfers into everything. And coming back to the workplace, however that someone is taught at home, we can't force them to switch their mindsets. But at the workplace, we can create an environment where we do respect each other from a very diverse perspective. And I know that we're running out of time, so I want to explore some resolutions, right? Focus in the workplace. How can we, as a society, just for this specificity purposes, let's focus in the United States. How do we promote healthy masculinity where we have male roles become sponsors, right? Because we want to enable diversity through friendships, allies, sponsors, partnerships, through hardship. So how do we shift mansplaining, condescending remarks, and assigning gender-specific roles to women, even in the boardroom, like you take notes, no, you go buy the cake, you go get coffee. How do we shift that paradigm to become equity for all and really promote diversity? I want to hear your thoughts.
So, Mila, if I can jump in, and I know Sarah is an HR professional, will chuckle on this. I'm going to answer your question in the negative. How we don't do it is through policies. We can't policy our way out of this. We can't write handbooks and just tell people that thou shalt behave this way. And I love what Mike shared about calling it out. Like that's how we make meaningful change. But we have to learn how to do that respectfully and not embarrass people and be honest. And it's about building a culture of authenticity. I love when Chebs used the word respect And that was one of the words that was bouncing off in my mind, Chebs, but also authenticity. And that builds on what Annie was saying, right? That if you want to open the door for someone, then hold the door open. It's a respectful thing to do. I don't care if you're young or old, pink, blue, or green, or what gender you identify at. I'm not going to slam the door in your face. Right? And so it's not about being masculine or feminine. It's being your authentic, respectful self. And how do we build that into our workplaces? Well, we better start promoting people that model that behavior.
Mhm.
Because unless that happens, and we in society have not done a great job of that, we've promoted people that actually model the opposite, in my humble opinion. So when we start making changes in our leadership and they model that behavior, and also call people out respectfully and build it into our performance management and our competency systems. So it's not just a policy, it's where the rubber hits the road. So, we spend time doing those coaching conversations with people. We spend time with performance management, and we talk about your sales and your communication skills and your project management. Well, what if we talked about, how you manage and interact with other people and your authenticity and your respect levels? That's, as Gabriel would say, I wonder if we'll see that in our lifetime. But if we do, maybe we'll start to make some meaningful change.
Yes, of course. And from to what you were saying, Melanie, I think it's something that of course you have to be open to learning, right? You have to be open to learn how to do this. I mean, it's just like anything, like even what Mike was talking about earlier about any kind of ism, any kind of hate, you got to be open to want to learn how to do it. You got to be open to want to actually change the stigma of whatever it is, whether it's what we're talking about here is sexism or racism. You got to be open to want to have to change your mindset. Nobody, that's going to be the hardest thing to do. Nobody wants to be forced to do it, forced to understand it. And I think it kind of goes back to, again, what Mike was saying in the very beginning. It's all about education early on. I think that's one of the best ways to do it, is start ingraining it into the next generation and the generation after that, is getting that out there. I mean, because to me, that's probably the best way to start doing it, is just that way you're not really forcing it, but you're kind of teaching it, and they're taking it in as something that maybe that they may understand, say, okay, I get it and I understand why, as opposed to saying, hey, this is what you have to do now. You have to change your mindset. I mean, sometimes our natural inclination is just going to say, I'm going to resist it anyway. Screw it. I'm not going to pay attention because they tell me to do it. I mean, so I love the fact what Sarah, what Melanie was saying, and even what Sarah was saying earlier, about just allowing things to happen. So if you don't put that stigma on a man to have to do something, it's the option. And I think it's the same thing that we want to offer to everybody, is to offer that option. So, those are my thoughts. Anybody?
No, I'll go. The one thing that I would add, I agree wholeheartedly with what Dr. Melanie said, and as the resident human resources person, if you are policing your way, and that's not even a word, but I made it up, policing your way to equality is never going to work, because all you're going to be met with is resistance and people who are complying out of fear, which is the exact thing that we're trying to avoid. You can't have fear and freedom existing in the same place. You can't ask people to be very, subscribe to a very rigid set of behaviors and then ask them to be authentic at the same time. Those things, they're completely competing concepts. They don't flow together mutually. So you have to, allow space for that. And the other thing that I think is going to be really important for us to unlearn and relearn in this process that we haven't talked about, and that's femininity. Femininity is awesome. Like, awesome. you know? And so, and there are things that are traditionally masculine, things that are traditionally feminine. And I think that that's completely okay. Both of those things can be equally awesome. And we're all made up of some parts masculine, some parts feminine. And we have to, you know, allow people that full spectrum of humanity sometimes in the same person. Like Annie talked about, her daughter is a bruiser, but she's also really sensitive. That was me as a kid. Like you know, and to some extent I still am. Like I go hard, but I also like my nails done, you know? So, and those things can exist in the same individual and be completely okay. And the same thing can be true for men. And I hate how toxic masculinity keeps men in this narrow box of what they can do and what they can enjoy and what they can participate in. And they miss out, you know, on this wide spectrum of experiences because it doesn't fit into this classic definition of what macho and masculine and manly things that you do. Go get your nails done. Like, by all means, go get somebody to scrub the calluses off them feet. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know, you have like take care of yourself. And but men really struggle with that. And I think the more that we relearn, that we unlearn masculinity and learn that that masculine and feminine are meant to yin and yang, the better off we all are going to be.
And for me, right, like I look at this and I go back to my crazy theories, which I have plenty of them, but I feel like labeling children at a young age desensitizes us towards everything going forward throughout life, and it makes us very numb towards labels, and it makes us very numb towards all different scenarios. Bye, Gabe. It makes, you know, it numbs us out, right? And I think the ideal situation is the day that I go to fill out an application, either a government form or a job application or anything else, and there is no place for me to put my sex. There is no place for me to put my race. There is no place to put my sexual orientation. Until those things are not on the applications or paperwork anymore, we're not even close to there, right? Because we're still identifying as what we look like, how we act, and who we're perceived to be, rather than looking at being appreciated for the individuals that we really are. Because just because you fall into one of those categories doesn't mean that you're anything specific to any one of them. It just means that that's part of who you are. And you're already being judged based on that small part, when I feel like there's a bigger picture involved and we're just overlooking it based on small pieces.
Shabs, would you like to contribute?
Oh, you want me to go? Yes, sure. Mike, very powerful point. Everybody has been talking, making some really important points. I would like to capture the proposed solution in the words authenticity and our shared humanity. I think that's what a lot of people have been talking about. Dr. Peacock was talking about that a little while ago. So we just have to be authentic. We have to be our authentic selves and then respect people. You know, we're all human beings. We are very unique in many ways, and we are very similar in many ways. So we need to celebrate that uniqueness of each of us, but also celebrate our shared humanity. And if we do these two things with respect, then I think we can start doing what Mike is suggesting, which is, why do we have to identify that, you know, I'm black or this or that? And, you know, when you even start looking underneath all of these distinctions, you start to find that they are really, they don't really serve us in any way or form. They only serve those who believe that the distinctions create a benefit, right, for them. So let's be authentic with each other. Let's be respectful with each other. Let's celebrate each other's unique attributes, and let's celebrate the shared attributes we have as human beings.
On that note, as your outro starts, Mila, that was my gratitude alarm. So everybody just think to yourself what you're grateful for. I'm sorry that went off, but that That goes off every day at 8 o'clock.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that gratitude alarm.
That was perfect.
That's awesome. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. Gabe had to go, and this has been a great discussion, right? In order to create a healthy, diverse culture, we have to dive deep into real issues that are present, but often treated as though they are invisible. Culture isn't only about ping pong tables, free tidbits. It is about creating a psychological safe space for all of your people to thrive with equity, where diversity and humanity becomes an integrated effort. It does not belong in the basement. Hardship is what we must practice. When we lead with empathy, compassion, love, and kindness, we will truly understand how people want to be accepted, which has been a recurring theme from all of our panelists today. Thus, creating an evolving culture. That's all the time that we have, beautiful hearts. We'll be back next week, same time, same day, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where I'll be dismantling something else with a new set of panels. Thank you again, all the brilliant panelists, for being here. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Again, subscribe to YouTube, like on Twitter, Facebook, and on LinkedIn. I'll be repurposing today's talk on the podcast Hardship, the Now of Leadership and Us, exploring science, culture science from three perspectives: home, society, and work. Have a brilliant, beautiful Friday, everyone, and I'll be seeing all of you next week.